Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Centered Therapist podcast. I'm Sindee Gozansky, and I'm so glad you're here today. I am excited about our guest. She is going to bring us hope, which I think we need so desperately these days. Let me introduce you to Rachel Horton White. Rachel Horton White is a clinical hypnotherapist and reader of the Akashic Records. She supports individuals in releasing negative patterns through mindfulness, energy, intuition exercises, and facilitates a connection with our true inner selves. Rachel is the author of Tools for the Awakening Soul, a guide to activate your intuition and uncover your life's purpose. A seeker and literal tree hugger, she resides in Maine with her husband and 2 children. You can find Rachel at www.soulfulworkconsulting.com. And I am so glad you're here, Rachel. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sindee. It's so fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So both Rachel and I are in Maine, so we're recording from the same state. And before we get into everything that we're going to talk about regarding spirituality and hypnotherapy and the Akashic Records, I just want to pause for a minute because we've had some really crazy things happen here in Maine. The last couple days, we actually had a small earthquake, which we almost never have, which seems kind of spiritual, like it was 4.1, 3.8 on the scale. And this is unusual for us. Now it's snowing. It's actually snowing as I talk. How does this fit into your understanding of our world in the spiritual realm?
Yeah, well, we'll start out with a bang, literally, because I actually didn't even feel the earthquake. I was home with my kids and we homeschool them, and I thought it was just somebody dropping something. But so maybe I did hear something, but then my son's bookshelf fell apart, which may have been actually a result of the earthquake, but I think it was something unrelated. So anyway, but then I heard about it, and with what you just asked about, if there's a spiritual sort of meaning, I think there's a few perspectives that I have on it. I haven't actually thought about it a lot, but I have thought about the weather changes because we certainly have been seeing a lot of very strange weather things going on. And some people call that climate change. Some people call it something else. But the only source of information that I trust these days is the Akashic Records, honestly. And that's where I go to try to understand what's going on. And there were wildfires and snow in Florida and all this weird stuff. So what I was shown in the Akashic Records about weather stuff was the poles shifting. And literally that's what came up. The poles are shifting. And
The poles.
Okay. The poles of the North Pole, South Pole. No, I honestly don't totally understand that. But when you think about the history of Earth, we've gone through ice ages and things like that are natural, that actually happen every 16,000 years or something. And that's the only, so I'm just interpreting the words that came up and the energy that came up. And so that's what my interpretation is that there's probably some other things involved too, but that's what I was told is, the poles are shifting and that this is actually a thing that the Earth is going through. And so that, when people hear that, then that sounds scary. You're like, well, does it mean it's going to be summer? Is it going to be hot in Maine all the time and cold in, I don't know, Costa Rica or whatever? But I don't know the answer to that. But what I did pick up on was that it's very, very gradual and that we have help, multidimensional help adjust to all these sort of changes. And then it'll be okay. And that this is part of what was predicted to happen anyway to Earth.
Yeah. Okay. So it may not feel okay or it feels unsettling, and there is hope. We have multidimensional help available, and it is all going to be okay.
And that's what I feel, and that's what I pick up on. And we can talk more about that too, because there's
absolutely. Yeah. Rachel, I don't know even what the Akashic Records are. I tried to look it up before we met, but I think there's other people who don't really know what the Akashic Records is. So maybe let's start with that.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I didn't know what it was either until I was in meditation about 5 years ago. And this these two words just boom came in my head, Akashic Records. I said to myself, well, that seems important. I'm going to write that down. Looked it up online as we do. And then I went and got a reading, and then I just loved it. And then I just learned more about the Akashic Records and learned how to read them for other people. And that's probably what I do more now than anything else. So in terms of readings, it does kind of it feels like an intuitive reading to people. But the way that I don't like to go around saying like psychic readings, because I feel like it's not the same in some way. And I think sometimes people have these preconceived ideas or stereotypes of what that is. And I try to always explain it a little bit differently. But from the beginning, if you think, let's go back to the word Akash. That word, if you look it up, is a Sanskrit word, and it means ether, or another way to think of it is the substance from which all things are born. And so the Akashic Records is known also in different religious texts like the Bible and maybe even the Quran, I'm not sure, or the Torah, as the book of life. And you see it, there's actually mentioned in the Bible a few times as the book of life. And so really what that is like it's a dimensional space that is almost like a universal library that holds the records of every human event, situation, thought, occurrence, experience that's happened throughout time. Pretty cool. And you can go in the Akashic Records. Usually most people are going in the records of a human soul. And that's what I do. And so that's where you see, everybody has different beliefs, but I'll just share what I believe. And, not everybody believes in past lives. Obviously I do, but that's where your past lives are held. A soul's past lives would be held literally in almost seems like shelves, like boxes of light that you pull out and get information on. That's the way I pick up on it, at least.
And there are also some very traditional references to the earth or the world being created from light and light sources as being primary in many spiritual traditions. So
yeah. And it's interesting because you're connecting the dots. Like the book of life is something that might sound familiar to people. And even that word Akash might sound familiar. And so there's hints, there's clues about it. And it is in the Akashic Records. Not only are there past lives, but there's information about our souls. And a lot of people are awakening and going through the spiritual kind of rebirth or growth. And they're like, what's my purpose? And what are my gifts? And you can get that information in the records. So it's really interesting what is there, like information about our purposes, about lessons we're here to learn, about why we've incarnated with certain people. Why do I have this family? What's going on there? And why is this person so challenging to me? Or why am I experiencing this health issue? All these, you can ask any and all questions. And then when I do a reading, it's basically energy that I'm reading that comes in the forms of just like images in my mind or words that kind of pop in, and it's hard to explain. There's also deceased loved ones that can show up that have messages. And so it's not mediumship, but I guess it can feel like that. There's spiritual teachers like Jesus or Buddha or Mother Mary, depending on the person's like spiritual or religious background, they'll come in sometimes. And then there's future timelines, which is very interesting. And I can tell you a little bit about when I went in the Akashic Records for the Earth and it was connected to the United States, to the country we're both in. There's some very interesting things coming up there. So yeah, it's all this, there's all kinds of stuff. There's even more I probably didn't even talk about, but it's just a really healing space that can really help just illuminate so much in people's lives and really help them understand themselves and like how to proceed. And it's just, it's such a gift to be able to help people in this way.
And this is a gift that you've developed and that you help make it accessible to other individuals who want to know, who are on that journey for themselves and want more. And you help them because not all of us are maybe at that level. And okay, you don't call yourself a medium, but you're offering somebody another place to go, another way to work and understand their soul and their purpose and their message. This is so important to me because spirituality is so important. I think it's fundamental to who we are as human beings. Also, to those of us who are doing relational work, it's very important. I really believe it's required to have some kind of spiritual practice or grounding when you're doing deep, intimate relational work, such as psychotherapy. And you come from that same background, clinical hypnotherapist as well. And so it seems like this has really taken off in a way that now you work on like so many other planes. So you wrote in your website that you work on 3 levels: the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious mind, 3 dimensions. Maybe we could unpack those a little bit. Would that be helpful as we talk about this like spiritual awakening that is there for us if we want it?
I think I'll start with the first one you said, conscious mind, because that's how most of us operate in our daily lives, is with our conscious mind. And the way I view that is what's available to us and on the surface, our thoughts, things we see, things we hear, things we experience, things we perceive. And that's great. That's all well and good. However, as I'm sure you know, because you're, is a psychotherapist, as you know, what really drives people to do the things they do, to say the things they say, is really in a subconscious or unconscious level. And what's tricky about that is that a lot of people, including myself at times, are not even aware of what it is that's driving their thoughts or their beliefs. Or they might not even be aware of what their beliefs are. And the thoughts are a little easier because they come in our mind. But sometimes we're not even aware of our thoughts. And then that can lead to emotions that can really be difficult. Which comes first, right? The thoughts or the emotions? Hard to know. But so I became a hypnotherapist, and I was really guided to it. I really wanted to learn about angels and intuitive guidance. And then I went back to school at this Southwest Institute for Healing Arts, which is in Arizona. It was an online thing, but it was through that I had to learn hypnotherapy. It was just part of this program I was doing of integrative healing arts. Anyway, and I found it just absolutely fascinating that it's all about the subconscious mind. And one of the best ways to, as a metaphor, and I think a lot of people understand this, but I'll use this metaphor, is an iceberg. You probably heard of like the iceberg beliefs, right? It's like we have let me just see an example. This is just coming to me. I had it recently with a client, of a belief of being enough, or being enough is so common for so many women in particular. And that can show up in many ways in our thoughts of insecurity or comparing ourselves to others, all these things, nasty things we do and say to ourselves.
Brutal.
We're so mean to ourselves. But at the core, the thoughts we have are like the iceberg that we see, the part of the iceberg that's above the water. But really, where it comes from is deep down, and icebergs actually go for miles beneath the surface. But it's so deep that we're not even aware of where that iceberg even begins. And that's the case with the subconscious mind, is that it's so deep. And so this is, I know you know about this, it's childhood. It's, the inner child. That's often where it starts in this life. And it could even be as a baby. It could even be in the womb, where we maybe hear one thing we hear from, often it's a parent, not always, but one little comment, you're not this, or, a parent leaves or something like that, can lead that child to believe they're not enough. And in the world that I live in, the real root is actually a past life of something happening in a past life. And then it's carried into this life. And so that is even more subconscious, because we don't have memories. We come into this life with amnesia. We don't have memories of our past lives, most of us. So that leads me into the superconscious. So that's where we actually enter with the Akashic Records, that when we are able to, it starts with meditation, quieting the mind, is the gateway to really accessing these superconscious states. And I believe actually the Akashic Records is really like a level of our light body. So it's like we have our physical body, and then we have our etheric body, like these invisible layers of our energy bodies around us. And some people say that's our aura, things like that. I believe that the Akashic Records is literally a layer, and like a layered cake that we can learn, all of us. I'm actually teaching a workshop in a few weeks or a few months in South Portland on how to read the Akashic Records. My mission is to teach, as many people as willing to read their own records, because it's changed my life, and I've seen it help other clients that I do readings for and that I teach. And that's accessing that really essentially the superconscious mind. That is, as Carl Jung would call it, the collective unconscious, is like things that are out there in the ether, but it's
so much deeper. Like the inner child then gets connected to past lives, to ancestral trauma. Like it just gets so expanded.
Yes. And actually, that's interesting you say ancestral, because in the Akashic Records, this is the thing I forgot to mention, ancestors will come in and they'll show, oh, this trauma has been passed down in the bloodline. That's why you feel this way, or this depression. There's so many bad things, unfortunately, but then there's gifts. Actually, all of us have been artists, or we've all been really intuitive, but maybe we're scared to share it. That was the case for me. Anyways, when we can become aware that these three levels that I conceive of, superconscious, subconscious, conscious, there's so much that I think can help people really understand themselves and their multidimensional selves, including past lives, and to really help themselves just feel better and break these stuck patterns in their lives, clear some of the limiting beliefs, get to the source of it. It's like pulling out a weed from the root, not just cutting off it, just cutting it off at the top, but you really got to pull it out from the root to get rid of it. So those are the ways that I perceive of these three levels.
Yes, it's fascinating, Rachel, and I feel the hope that's like underlying this whole process. Would you be open to sharing a little? You said the Akashic Records has really changed your life. Like maybe in a few ways, how has it been transformative for you?
Yeah, I love that. I think without going like too personal, I guess,
Right,
I'll share a little bit, but
whatever you're comfortable with.
I don't mind. I think we all have things in our lives that we're working on. And for me, it was some conflicts with certain family members and some friends and things that I just didn't understand. And one of the things that it helped accessing the Akashic Records has really helped me do is have a different perspective, because often what happens is we get stuck in our ego, our conscious identity, the part of us is trying to keep us safe and protect us from something unfamiliar that can be harmful. And it's not all bad, but it can really lead to irrational sort of thinking. And so I'd had this tendency to be like, oh, it's the reason this is happening is because this person, it's either I was bad or they're bad. We all do that. We internalize or we externalize. And I was doing a little bit of both. But when I went in the Akashic Records asking about like relationships with certain people in my life, I was shown different things. Like for one, there was one person when I was shown this person as a child and how she felt. She didn't feel loved. She didn't feel wanted. And just by being shown that image, it just brings emotion to me now.
Yeah.
It brought compassion.
Yeah.
Because I was like, maybe I won't be so angry at her because I feel like she's hurt me and all the ways she acts out of her wounded inner child, that she's just like a little girl that doesn't feel loved. And so that perspective was really pivotal for me, because I was able to have that compassion and that empathy and understanding and not take it on and not hold so much resentment and anger.
Yeah. Right.
And that's everything, right? I think that's really what the Akashic Records do, is show us the truth of what's really going on. And so we can like take the blinders off of what we perceive might be happening, that there's probably some truth. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle, but that often we can get led down a really dark or like inaccurate path that could lead to grudges being held or people not speaking to each other and all these horrible things that can happen in families. That is really not, sometimes it's important to protect ourselves if there's been severe harm, that's justified, but that didn't feel right for me in this case. So and I've done that in so many different situations of what's really going on and being able to have that light. It's really like the light, it's like a flashlight that's shown on the truth. And sometimes it's not something I want to hear. It's, oh, I don't want to hear that. I remember
be careful what you ask for.
Exactly. You're going to hear the answer if you ask for it. But like, I know there was this really strong guidance. There was another situation where the guidance was just be nice to this person. Don't try to prove that you're right. Don't try to explain your position. Just be nice. But I want to show that I'm right. And I want to, the ego. And I really listened to that. I was like, okay, I'm going to be nice. I'm just going to be kind to them above all. And it helped with a different sort of situation, a few people, and it really helped. So that's
such a beautiful example too, because one hears in that the wisdom of the Akashic Record, and also that kindness and that like spiritual precept that most spiritual traditions have around being kind or considering the other person. That's really beautiful.
like the loving kindness Buddhist
Mhm.
perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Right. So, as you're talking about this perspective and going back to the conscious mind, and I think as we're recording this and it's January 2025, there's been so many shifts in the world, geographically, politically, there's just a lot of upheaval. And so you said you also have recently researched the Akashic Records for the earth and for what's going on. And I think in our conscious minds, we go into that negative, irrational, all we see for the most part are a lot of problems, and it can be very scary and overwhelming.
Mhm.
So you are trying to also help us have a different connection with our place in the world.
So I can shed some light on what I picked up on if you're one, which you might be alluding to. There is a lot of fear in the collective right now. A lot of people are in fear. And what I'm going to say, I'll give a disclaimer that
Okay.
this doesn't mean I have the privilege of not being in some of these places of fear myself. It doesn't mean that it's not okay to feel those things. I think we can't control what we feel. Like we feel what we feel. And that doesn't mean it's not real or valid. But so that when in the Akashic Records, it's just coming at a higher perspective. It's like the bird's eye view of what's going on. And the way what I've learned from being in the records so much myself, I do readings like all the time, is I look at things, believe me, it's easier said than done. But I try to look at things from the higher picture, like the big picture. So when I did go in the Akashic Records the other day, I was asking about the current events, definitely the political shifting, the current leaders in the US, and I won't mention names because it can be triggering to people, but we all know what we're talking about here. And what I was shown was dismantling, like a dismantling of a system that is broken and that it actually needs to be dismantled. And because it's been broken for a long time. And the other thing I was shown is that we as humans want to put labels on people as being good or bad. And what they were saying to me was it's not about being good or bad. It's something that just is. And so it's like we all sign up for roles to play roles in our lives, obviously in our lives and in other people's lives. And this is getting a little out there, so just bear with me. But
Okay.
I don't know if you were you or some people may have heard about Atlantis, which is like this ancient lost civilization, and there's varying beliefs about it. But this is I'm just a messenger. What they were showing me was the leaders now are the same leaders in Atlantis. And in Atlantis, as you may know, like it fell, like it just the civilization crumbled and was just gone. But at one point there was this golden age of psychic abilities and telepathic communication and love and all these beautiful things. But then the leaders fell into ego and believed they were like gods and that fell into ego, like arrogance, greed, all that sort of stuff, right?
Right.
And so we're seeing that repeat itself, that some of these leaders they're resuming some of these roles, but that in fact, they don't want to do that. This is subconscious, not at their conscious awareness, that they don't want to destroy the civilization again. But it's like we as the people, citizens of the US or just even people on Earth, we are being asked to stop giving our power away to those in leadership. Because for so long, for as long as I can think of in my life and like for human history, we have done that. We've believed that a person who's elected to a position or is a ruler or whatever has the ability to either ruin our lives or save our lives. When in fact, that's not true, that they don't have that ability. And there's this other thing there's a free will. There's a divine law of free will that I believe is similar to like a law of gravity, like the law of attraction. We do have this ability to create our lives in the way we want them to be. Like that's what people do when they do the law of attraction, vision boards, visualizations. It's harder. Sometimes it's harder than it seems because we have a lot of limiting beliefs we got to clear. But I don't know about you. I'm sure you have done this. It does work. The law of attraction is a real thing. We just got to clear our stuff away. So the law of free will is similar to that in that, yes, there's two things at play in my belief. There's like fate, destiny, soul contracts, things set out ahead of time is like part of the plan, which I think is what's going on right now on Earth and in our country. This is all part of the plan, but we can shape it with how we want it to. We also are co-creators. That's the second dimension to this. So we're being asked as a people to say, you know what, I'm not going to just look at what they're doing all the time and react and just be like, what are they doing now? Oh, I've got to react, but shift it. And this is what they're showing me, from reactive to proactive, to be like, well, what do I want my life to be like? How do I want my reality to be, my community to be? And can I visualize that, just like some of us do for our individual lives with visioning and stuff? Can we do that for your town, for your community, for your state, like whatever you locally, and really focus our energy on that and not on what these people that they kind of showed me, they're like toddlers that are going around breaking things. And like a toddler, when the toddler's learning, kids break stuff. They just, that's how they learn. That's what they were showing me, is it's this sort of unconscious level of operating that isn't good or bad. It just is, like a toddler just is. And so if we can stop viewing it like that, then we're going to take our power back and create the reality we want. So
yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. So there's this dismantling, and it's not really malicious necessarily, even though sometimes in our conscious mind we might view it that way.
Right. It can feel that way. It certainly can. And I think it's all about perspective. It might seem that way. And again, I think I would just say this. It's hard to talk about this, but I'll say it because I think you understand, and hopefully your listeners will, which what I've picked up on is that we might look at somebody who's suffering and they have this horrible thing happen. And we might say, why does that happen? Like, why does somebody get this horrible disease, right? Yeah. Why does they have such a hard life and I don't? Or why blah, blah, blah. And it's part of the soul contract. It's part of the plan. It's like how, often with past lives, it's like, it's about balance and understanding. And so maybe, harmed somebody in a past life. So we're going to choose to understand what that was like. We're going to have them, they're going to volunteer to harm us in this life. So we learn how that feels. Or maybe we've been, abused by somebody repeatedly throughout our lifetimes. And we always took it on as that it was our fault. We deserved it. And so the pattern repeats again. But this time we're being given the tools to make a different choice and to stand up for ourselves and not allow it to happen. So when we think of it that way, and this can be difficult for people to grasp, because they can say, you mean this is my fault? Like I chose this. And the honest answer is, yeah, you did. This is how people learn. It's part of the plan.
But completely unaware, because it was maybe a different iteration of you that chose.
Absolutely. We would have no memory. And people say, why would I have chosen this horrible thing? The part of the learning. It's all about learning.
Yeah.
And there's free will too, and people can do horrible things to each other that might not have been part of the plan, and then they're gonna, guess what? They're gonna have karma to deal with. They're gonna have to deal with that in their next life. So anyway, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. But
it is. Here's a question. With you doing so many readings, how do you take care of yourself? Because you're getting so much. You're getting bombarded and holding all of these truths that sometimes are painful and sharing them with your clients. And what does your self-care look like for this process?
I went to yoga last night. So that was one thing awesome. I did. I go out every morning in the woods and I walk my dog and I sit under trees, and I went cross-country skiing this morning, and I get massages sometimes, but I meditate a lot. I try to bring in light. I have my own, it's really through light and healing and the earth that I try to clear stuff.
That's how recharge and clear.
Yeah. And then I go on my own Akashic Records, what's going on here. I do cut cords a lot to clients because there's so much intense stuff that I'll just consciously, I work with angels a lot. So I talk to Archangel Michael, who's like the angel of cutting, protection and courage and removing fear. And I'll just say, can you help me cut my cords? And then so I do not carry this anymore. And I just literally imagine cut. And I say, can you, I ask angels, guides, God, whoever, I talk to all of them to help that person. Can you hold them in light so I can just move on? Exactly. Yeah. And that's the only way I can, because it gets very intense. You're right.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that process with us. So, as somebody wants to start doing some of this work, is it when you work with somebody, for instance, Rachel, do you help them develop a meditation practice, a writing practice, a prayer practice, a nature-based practice? Like, how does somebody get there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm pretty clear to people like, in order, if you're going to want to be open to something spiritual, if you're going to work with me, we're going to be a good fit if you're open to spiritual stuff. If you're not, then we're probably not. But then from there, I try to meet people where they're at. What do they want in their life? I would definitely will suggest meditation, or I call it quieting the mind because it seemed a little less overwhelming. And I'll just say, what do you think would work for you? And I will make suggestions like minutes in the morning, just starting out real small. Is it sitting in your room listening to music, or is it going outside? I also will suggest that they connect to something higher than themselves, something loving. It doesn't have to be God if that word is triggering to people. And so most people are okay with just the word light, which I feel is God, source, creator, whatever you want to call it. Then I often suggest they get a little more specific to get specific guidance. And if they're open to it, I'll talk to them about spirit guides or angels, like ascended masters like Jesus or Buddha or Mother Mary or Kuan Yin, or there's different ones, which are like beings that walked the earth, or they were humans, but they transcended ego and they can really help us with specific things in our lives. And so I'll see what they're open to and then talk to them about it. And like you said, another thing is tools. So I obviously am a writer. I do love giving people tools like writing reflections. What are the beliefs you might be carrying? Write them down, process through them. What do they mean to you? What might they be connected to? Can you reframe some of these beliefs? And I'll do this with people in sessions just because it can be difficult to do on your own.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite tools is having, if and when they're ready, we'll talk about it, writing a pretend letter to whoever created a limiting belief. Like I call it the hidden stories. So a parent often, when you said this to me, when you did this, and they'll say, oh, my mom did say this thing when I was a kid and that really stuck with me. Or when my dad did this thing, it really, so that's, if it's coming up for a reason. And the pretend letter can be, this is how it affected me. This is how it hurt me. This is how I've been continuing to be affected by this thing, and I want to release this because I want to become this person in my life, and blah blah blah. And that can be a very powerful way to just separate.
But yeah, a way to also start shifting that limiting belief, and then you would work with them on this deeper superconscious level.
Yeah. So then I often will go in the Akashic Records in a super conscious level to learn like what's going on, and at a soul level, what are the patterns you're working on breaking? What are the lessons you're working on learning? And then from there, I'll suggest hypnotherapy as a very powerful way to clear some of that stuff and kind of bring in. One of my favorite writing exercises is helping them create a vision of their future self, how they want to feel. If they don't know what it is, usually they know how they want to feel. So and then maybe what's their daily life like? What do they look like? Who's around them? How does it feel to be this, all they've dreamed of? And then we'll kind of program that in, or I will, I guess. We do it together in a way in hypnotherapy. So they really believe that's them. Inner child regressions, very powerful way to clear that stuff. But the hypnotherapy comes in as the Akashic Records will show like a picture of what's going on in their life and what to do about it. And then we'll actually do it, as I know you do with your clients, through some of the writing, just the verbal processing, and then getting in the subconscious to clear it through, the modality I use is hypnotherapy.
It's hypnotherapy. And so you're getting them in a relaxed state or through some like more open state, and then starting to really install this idea of their future self or whatever they're trying to change.
Yeah. There's different ways to do hypnotherapy. That would be called suggestive hypnotherapy, which is just, and I like to also clear, like we work with the metaphor of getting your feet out of the mud or taking off a heavy backpack or climbing over a wall. And I like to bring in a spirit guide or something to help them do that. And then they'll walk on a path and see this figure up ahead, and that's their future self. And they get closer to her or him, and they become one, and they feel it. And so that's literally like a hypnotherapy script. Another way is to do guided imagery, or where I'll ask them, what's an image of their highest self that they're seeing, or their future self, and they'll talk and they'll say what's coming up. And then it'll say, what's an image of any resistance you have to that, as which might, whatever that is, a protective ego, the wounded child. And then we'll ask them to describe that. And then ideally we get some ideas from that resistance part. This is parts therapy, pretty much.
I was just going to say, right?
You
It's
know.
very parts therapy.
Exactly. It's all the same stuff. And then you help them merge together and get some ideas of solutions and stuff like that. But and then there's inner child, which is another thing, and past life stuff. But yeah, it's all the same stuff, just we use different words.
Use different words, but you're also bringing in another plane or another body of information and wisdom and guidance through the Akashic Records.
Yeah, and that's exactly. It's bringing in the superconscious.
The superconscious, or with the angels. That's really fascinating too. You said you wanted to study angels.
Exactly. I used to do tarot. I started out with tarot cards, actually, and I was doing readings for people, and then I learned the Akashic. I learned the Akashic Records, and I love that more. I still do tarot cards for myself, and sometimes I'll have clients pull a card if they want, but the Akashic Records I just love it so much, so I do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this is just a little aside, but recently I've been, for no real reason other than maybe aging and being interested in my own identity, I've been thinking a lot about my ancestors that I never knew. And so I'm wondering, if a client came to you and told you that, what would you advise them?
With their if they want to learn about their ancestors?
Yeah. Or
why is that coming up? Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Why is that coming up?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the energies right now on Earth are there's so much light coming in. We don't see it usually, but that when there's so much light coming in, it's like the light. If you think about like if you were to shine a flashlight, you start to see what's in the shadows. You start to see what's in the corners.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff is literally in our bodies and our mind, and it's not always fun, good stuff. And a lot of the patterns that we might become aware of in our own lives are things that were passed down from our ancestors. It comes from somewhere, right?
Right.
And so that is probably why it's coming up, because the light around us is really illuminating whatever is stuck or dissonant or doesn't really belong in our bodies or in our consciousness anymore. And it's coming up to be healed. And one of the best ways to heal that, in my view, is through the bloodline, is working with ancestors. And you don't have to go in the Akashic Records to do that. You could just go into sort of a meditative state and just ask them to come in. I always like to bring in light, because that light is a frequency. And when you bring in light to your body, you're raising your vibration, or it's like tuning into a radio station where you can connect with the spirit realm or with your deceased loved ones in the spirit realm. It's like you're matching that frequency of a higher vibration of love, and it's hard to get into that with all of our human sort of worries and fears and the stuff so yeah, I think that and you just ask them, like, what do you want me to know? What can you share about your life? How can I break this pattern in my own life? Or how can I heal this? And a great place it's easier to do that in the Akashic Records, I will say. And if anybody's curious, for you or anybody, in my book, I actually have a whole chapter of how you can go in your own records. So it's whether reading a book to learn how to access the records may or may not work for everybody. You might need to do a little more, like a workshop or a class or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah,
you have all of these. You have an amazing website and retreats and all kinds of offerings and classes.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned your book, and that's really cool, I might have to at least read that chapter.
Yeah.
Other parts of it. I love how you show it on your website, soulfulworkconsulting.com. But tell us about your book, Rachel.
Yeah. So the book it flows through different tools and a process that I called the Soulful Work Framework, or the Soulful Work Method, which was essentially what I was doing with clients. And I actually teach this 10-month program, which I'm actually enrolling people for now. It's called the Intuitive Guide Certificate Program, where I teach people to do the work I do, minus the hypnotherapy part. That's like level 2.
And is this virtual training?
It's virtual. Yeah. It's all on Zoom. It's
amazing.
Starts in a few months. But yeah, so I started that program first, and I was teaching people all these concepts, and then the book came from that. I was like, what am I teaching them? And then I just use that same template. And in the program, since I'm talking about it, I might as well just say it's like a process of people experiencing this sort of inner work themselves. And then you learn and intuitive life coaching, ego clearing tools, learning how to read the Akashic Records and do readings for others, connecting with higher guidance, opening your intuition. And then in the program, at least, it's like how to start a spiritual business. And anyway, but the book is really based on that. So it's okay, what do you want in your life? How do you want to feel? Come up with a vision for that. And there's tools and writing exercises in the book. I put in like my own life experiences, things I've done. I weave in client case studies throughout the book. And then it's quieting the mind is a beautiful way to just begin a foundation of connecting in with your highest self, clearing away any sort of negative thoughts, beliefs, stories, and that how to start that as a practice. And then there's a whole bunch of chapters on ego and clearing negative beliefs, thoughts, stories, healing with the inner child. And then there's part on how to develop your intuition and work ways, sorts of higher guides you can work with and how to connect with them. Of course, the Akashic Records. There's a few chapters in there on working with heavy emotions and clearing and protecting your energy, especially if a lot of us are empathic and we're picking up on a lot of energy right now.
Empathic or
yes. And then the last part is really like action. We're a planet of action. So what are you going to do? This is a life coaching sort of piece. What are you going to do to bring all this stuff forward in your life? So it's like a toolkit sort of, you can literally write in the book. You can go from front to back, or you could just skip around, see what you feel guided to. But yeah, I use it myself sometimes. I go back and do my own exercises.
Yes, that's the beauty of it, that it really works. And you're a testament to that. And it's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. It sounds amazing. And it flows so naturally from you. It's like, can tell how real and a part of you it is. And so I think people would benefit from it, and especially therapists, because we work with all of these things, maybe from a different way, but we're always looking for another tool. We need different ways to work with each client and also with ourselves. And we can only take people as far as we've done the work ourselves. So I hope that people check it out. How would you see this program that you've developed, a 10-month program? Sure, has more of a spiritual basis, or might be like creating a spiritual business, but I could see a therapist who works from a heart-centered, intuitive place be very interested in this. How would you see it helping their work?
Yeah, actually, I've taught this program now, like this is the 5th year, and a number of people are therapists who have done it. And I can think of one in particular who really wanted to help her clients connect more intuitively and spiritually, but she was afraid of losing her license can I talk about this stuff? And one of the things that really helped her is one of the things we do is do guided meditations. Like she started learning how to lead people in guided meditations. And there's ways you can get around it. Like you don't have to call it a spirit guide, just call it a wise inner advisor or a friend who's coming and helping you. I used to do workshops in public schools, and I would do that with kids. And I didn't call it a spirit guide. I'd say it's like a wise friend, and they would just boom, come right in. So anyway, yeah, I think that for a lot of maybe people that are listeners of yours, there's so many of us that really want to develop these spiritual sides, but whether or not you like hang a shingle up saying I'm an intuitive guide, you don't need to do that. But just these can be tools that you use depending on the client, like you trusting your intuition. Is this person open to this? And I do that myself, like just asking them, do you want to, there's this thing that might be interesting to you. And they might even tell you, I want to open my intuition, or I feel like I want to do Reiki, and or I feel like I have gifts I want to share, but I don't know how. And so one of the things in this program is it's like you said, as within, so without. In the intuitive guide program, people are doing their own inner work to move past their own fears, to really be able, because when we can do that for ourselves, then we know what it's like for our clients, and we're able to hold even better space for them, knowing how it feels to clear away those fears, to really share your gifts in a way that feels safe, because not everybody is going to be open to this stuff. And I certainly don't tell everybody about all these things, because they might not resonate. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things, is giving people the tools to integrate not only spiritual side, but also from a hypnotherapy perspective, ways to really help people clear what's in the subconscious mind that is holding them back. And so even though I'm not teaching people hypnotherapy, I incorporate a lot of the hypnotherapy
Right.
sort of tools in there. And so we're doing some guided imagery and inner child work. I think there's a lot that
Yes.
people could incorporate into their into their existing practices.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so exciting, Rachel. And it really is, it's so connected because I think a lot of therapists, when they think, when, if you think about your own therapy, what's really helped you? Is it something structured or is it something where all of a sudden you're like in this deep intuitive space with your therapist? And usually it's the latter. I think we have the opportunity to bring whatever is going to help our clients with their permission, always with their permission. This is relational work that we do. And what you're saying is we have a way bigger relationship with ourselves than we're even aware. We have relationship with past selves, with other iterations, with so much energy in the world and the universe that could be helpful to bring into a healing session.
Yeah, for sure. I think I feel like that's the future that we're all moving into, is the accessing more of our whole selves, our soul, like all of our souls, who we
Mhm.
are at this
Yeah.
higher level. So yeah, I love that you see that you're sharing this too. It makes me so happy.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes. I really think that we shouldn't shy away from what can be healing. And this deeper, superconscious level is fascinating. And most people have had a glimpse of it somewhere. And then we're
Definitely.
either scared of it or we're interested or we don't know how to move forward.
Yeah. And that's so normal. That was me as well, from past lives, from
Mhm.
our parents, and they're doing the best they could. But there is some lot of fear that we're all clearing to
Yeah.
really open ourselves up.
Hmm.
It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. I will include all of your contacts in our show notes. I really want to acknowledge you, Rachel, for this amazing, open-hearted work you're doing and really helping people connect with their souls. It's so beautiful. I know people are going to want to contact you after hearing this episode. I'm going to read your book. Remind us the title of your book and also where people
Yes.
can find you.
Yes. Thank you. Tools for the Awakening Soul, a guide to activate your intuition and uncover your life's purpose. But you can just call it Tools for the Awakening Soul. And that book is on Amazon, but you can get to it also if you're in Maine. There's a few local bookstores that sell it. Um, you can get to the book through my website, and then there's a link to Amazon if you want to get it from there. And my website is soulfulworkconsulting.com, or you can go to rachelhortonwhite.com. They go to the same place. And yeah, that's all. People are welcome to reach out, contact me with any questions. Hypnotherapy, Akashic Records. There's these programs. I teach two big programs, actually. There's the Intuitive Guide program, and then there's a hypnotherapy certification program, which I'm in the middle of right now. But
Oh, wow.
those both come up every year. So I teach people to become hypnotherapists as well.
Oh, amazing. Wow, you're
It's
so busy.
cool. It's
Yeah.
cool. I know. I don't know. I'm crazy.
And just to clarify, will you also do like one-to-one virtual sessions with
Oh,
people who want
yes.
to do an Akashic Records
Yes. Yep, I do
session?
a lot, mostly virtual is what I do actually. We
Mhm.
can do past life regressions, inner child, all of that can be done virtually. Akashic Records, just life coaching, hypnotherapy, all that can be done virtually. But in
Mhm.
person is great too, if somebody happens to be in Maine.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that would be important to share with our listeners that
Yeah, I know there's a lot of fear and worry right now, and when I go in the Akashic Records, it's all moving in a positive direction. I hope that reassures people. It's not like, there's this apocalypse. Are we in the apocalypse sort of thing? And I feel like if we can hold out hope that there are things, just like we're dismantling a lot of the fears and our limiting beliefs in ourselves, that's also happening in the collective, in the country, in the world. And for me, what's gotten me through all the uncertainty is just really relying on my higher guidance and asking for help and asking for guidance, and having a lot of trust. So I do feel like it's all moving in a positive direction. We just got to get through the chaos phase of it.
Yes. Thank you for that. That feels almost like a blessing and that we can all trust in this dismantling process that it's going to be positive and we'll experience a new version of ourselves
Yeah,
and our country and our
I
world.
hope so. Hopefully in our lifetimes. I believe it'll be in our lifetimes. Let's hope.
Yes, let's hope. That's wonderful. Thank you again so much, Rachel.
Thank you so
And
much,
it's
Cindy.
such a pleasure. Thank you to my listeners. You make this possible. Really appreciate you. And until next week, stay heart centered.